Welcome everyone to this episode of the Last Enclosure.
We're your hosts, Mike and
Nick.
We've got a special episode for you today. Follow up to our last conversation about AI. I think though this is kind of a different through line, talking through a very common talking point that is emerging even as the AI bubble is deflating or popping.
We live in strange times where the bubble popping occurs quite so slowly. But yeah, the important sort of emphasis of today is a concept called the permanent underclass. And this is probably a phrase that'll be bandied about with increasing frequency. And it is being used in sort of tech circles, in sort of oligarchic circles, in in a sort of policy wonkish side of things. And so hopefully we can kind of distill this into a conversational package and examine it in a timely way.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a lot to talk about with this particular phrasing, sort of its origins, its implications, exactly why people are freaking out about it. Although, very interestingly, I just saw a podcast episode from Derek Thompson earlier today. Not that I watch him, calling for the claims that AI is going to take jobs. The job apocalypse, as they've been saying, was overblown. Of course, Thompson was one of the earliest voices saying AI was taking jobs, so he's jumping on the bandwagon as usual. But anyway, there's this tension where, if you're living where we are living, people are still talking about the permanent underclass as a serious kind of...
As a note, we are speaking to you from the Bay Area, California, so sort of the heart of the beast, if you will.
My bad. Yeah, we mentioned that in the first episode.
Yeah. We'll try to reemphasize that.
Yeah.
We are speaking to you from a place, at least, of witnessing it, working near it, and inside of it.
In the lion's den.
Indeed, yes.
So, yeah, there's some sense that there's still this fear about the permanent underclass in tech, right? So there's this bubble, not the economic bubble. There's this social bubble. There is this cultural bubble of people working in Silicon Valley and SF, and they are still feeling as if AI, if it won't take jobs, will allow them to create opportunities that wouldn't otherwise exist. Right? There's this sense that for all the flaws of LLMs, and we talked about this a bit in previous episodes, the one thing that it does to the user, even in cases where it is useful, is it creates this effect of efficacy, of forward motion, right? You basically, I liken it to this idea of APM or actions per minute in video games, right? So there are people who are using LLMs to automate workflows. Now, whether or not they are judging the efficiency of these workflows, I don't know. But the fact that you can automate all this work, be it redundant work or work that's not even useful, whatever, but you just feel like you're doing more things per minute, right? Your APM is going up. And so even if you're...
In the video game metaphor, this is sort of like, oh, I'm crafting and I'm also training my pet and I'm also, gaining these skills or learning this magic. Like, look at all the things I'm doing to get better and upgraded. In real life, seemingly only the LLM is offering that kind of high intensity, high pace, skill improvement all the time, every day.
Yeah, it's not even skills. It's just literally I can offer. So in Silicon Valley,
task handling, yeah,
right, task handling. So people in Silicon Valley are not using chatbot interfaces; they're using agents. An agent, for the audience, is just basically it's a large language model that can prompt itself continuously until a task is done. So the interface is different, but this idea of agentic kind of workflows being different from LLMs is sort of a misnomer because it's the same technology. It's the exact same technology. It's only you've gotten the LLM to prompt itself to finish a task over time, right? And so if you've got, say, dozens of agents doing loops or whatever, your visible APM has gone up. Now, whether you've asked yourself with these tasks to be automated or, if even the workflows are being automated correctly, that's another question, right? But the reason I think, sorry for the long tangent. The reason why I think this permanent underclass idea is still relevant, even this late into the bubble, is because, for true believers, their APM is up. They must be doing something more efficient. And if their APM is higher than your APM, well, they will join, the permanent overclass, and you will be remaining in the permanent underclass, right? And so even as the bubble is deflating, for those of us who are in the cultural bubble of SF, there is this sort of self affirmed notion of, well, even if AI has no ROI, my APM is high. This will not go away. Someone will find a way to make this work because everyone's APM is going too high for this to just go away.
Right. And of course, the responsible thing at this juncture is to point out that there's a lot of the fallacy of metrics, right? I'm able to measure more outputs, therefore I am improved. I'm offering more, I'm increasing value. When in fact, uh, it can be a misleading metric. In fact, often is. But we have to measure and we have to kind of sell ourselves and pitch ourselves using something. And that thing should be as objective as possible. So this is kind of what we've settled on in this time period right now, is this, this APM sort of abstraction.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even. I mean, going back to metrics, that's a good point. Like, so there's a Peter Drucker business. You can call it business school or business idiot if you're privy to Edzitron, the biggest bubble deflator.
Shout out to our boy Edzitron. Yeah.
So Drucker says, whatever isn't measured, doesn't get managed, right? Is actually an inversion of an earlier quote by, I want to say RF Ridgeway. It's something like that. I'll put it in the show notes. But Ridgeway says something to the effect of, whatever gets measured gets managed, even when it's useless to do so. So there's this sense of, we live in a society where people are looking for metrics that are easy to correlate to measures of success, measures of efficacy, measures of progress. And okay, there are abstractions that do map to kind of crudely to those things. But sometimes when you go too far in measuring things, well, you end up measuring things that don't matter, but because they look like they matter, and because those things are going up and up and up and up and up, you kind of just follow the trend line, basically maximizing something that actually doesn't really matter, right? And so the question for, LLM agents is, of the tasks that they're being automated, because keep in mind with agents, because the LLM is prompting itself over and over and over, and because modern agentic AI workflows involve reasoning models, these are models that actually, before they start a task, they have to actually emit tokens to themselves. It's as if there is, going back to our Leonard Shelby.
Self-assigning the tokens?
Yeah. So if you remember in our last episode, we talked about Leonard Shelby, the metaphor of Grandpa Shelby.
Grandpa Shelby, yeah.
Right.
Strikes again.
So this is as if, because the model has amnesia, this is as if, Shelby is writing, before he's given a task, he's writing down all the things he has to do, and then looking at that screen board that he just wrote on and saying, okay, right. So, you or I might think to ourselves before doing a task, LLMs like literally verbatim have to emit tokens in order to imitate that process of thinking, like, okay, my first step is to do this and do that, do this, that. And thinking waste a lot of tokens before the task has even begun, right? So you've got an LLM that is thinking, quote unquote, right, writing on the draft board, right, before starting a task, which costs money. And then in order to do the task as an agent, has to keep prompting itself, not with reasoning tokens, but with actual tokens, to keep continuously finishing the task until it's done, right? So this is a very, at best, inefficient process, right? Now, for the user who's able to automate these workflows, especially if they're subsidized or they're not paying the cost directly,
of those tokens,
right?
Yeah.
It feels like they're doing a lot, and they're doing a lot for cheap because they're not paying the full price of the token. And one of the, obviously, we're in a bubble because, well, a lot of these workflows may not be sustainable if you actually were paying for them on a per token basis. And that's sort of like the big, lesson that a lot of people are learning as we're recording this, is that, well, even if it feels like our APM is up, it may not be worth it to do these tasks in these ways. The workflows can still be valuable. It's just that the cost of doing them this way is way too high. So there's, this is the core mismatch at the heart of the AI bubble. And there's a question of what happens, when the token reality hits everybody, and what they're going to do. Most likely, they're going to cut back on tokens. And my thesis has always been, going back to my writing at Misaligned Markets, what I did talk about the bubble. The thesis has always been, well, look, we have this technology for better or for worse now. I believe it's better for harmful technology to not have been invented, but these things exist. What will likely happen is people will begin scoping them to tasks where the token cost actually matches the ROI of the task, right? And maybe that means agents survive, but like it probably won't be the agents we have today. Very likely, though, you will have bespoke workflows that are kind of very basic. Like, to give you an example, I have a home lab, so I played around with the technology just to understand it. Um, and I was reading subreddits like LLM Dev and a few others, and the people who were actually the very, very beginning of the AI takeoff around 2024, 2025 were doing kind of like consultant work where they were basically pitching themselves to companies, automating low-hanging fruit, like basic classification tasks using on-premise large language models. So you feed a model a bunch of images that need to be, approved, like say contracts or something like that. And this is not actually a real workflow, so don't worry, anyone who's like saying, "Are my
His
applications?"
job resembles this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have some type of document that has a certain type of schema, so you can actually codify. This document has a name, it has a blah blah blah, it has these features, right? So when you see
serial number or
right,
something. Yeah.
when you see these features, you give a document this score. When you see these other features, you give a document this other score, right?
This is relatively objective.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the point, right? So there is value in having workflows that revolve around tasks that are measurable, not just in a my APM is up kind of subjective way, right? Going back to what I call the effective design of LLMs, which you can only judge them if you're using them as the tech bros, the oligarchy has intended, is just, wow, these outputs really match my either feeling or whatever. I'm going to run with them. I like this, right? And now you're putting it into a workflow where it's like, no, now we've got some external validation of, did it actually meet this criteria? Now, this does not make the technology valuable. I think it was incredibly wasteful that we had this bubble. But again, the local models aren't going away, and very likely, even when or if OpenAI and Anthropic implode, their models probably aren't going away. Some tech companies like Google or Amazon or whoever will scoop up their models, right? It's just that they will be put towards boring and hopefully less harmful uses. And
Less ambitious uses, probably.
I think there could still on the margins be ambitious uses, but they will probably be bespoke and mundane.
The kind of radical and drastic over promising that we are currently witnessing.
Oh, right. That
has to subside at some
goes
point.
away.
Yeah.
That over promising. I mean, yeah, the mismatch again of the bubble is, and we can get into this because it goes back to us exploring this question of the permanent underclass. The big misalignment of the bubble is these guys, many of them, thought that they were making AGI, right, artificial general intelligence, and so they were promising, God or a machine that could do anything because they believed it was imminently possible. Now,
even in their early stages, they saw line goes up, its capabilities are increasing. Therefore, at some point, it has to be AGI.
Yeah, so
it was a kind of a presumption.
If you even look at the academic literature, at least on this side of the machine learning divide, I'm thinking of people like Richard Sutton, who was a prominent researcher. There are people, and I don't know if this is exactly Sutton. I mean, Sutton has this thing called the bitter lesson, which revolves around you can have a very simple algorithm. And in some ways, scaling that up is actually more efficient than trying to create bespoke rules that anticipate certain contingencies and whatnot. So, for example, a lot of AI's earliest days, and I use AI in this sense deliberately. Dear listener, if you remember in the last episode, I was talking extensively about separating all these technologies from one another, right? But I'm using AI deliberately in this case. The history of AI begins with what are called, I guess you could say, rules-based AI, they call this good old fashioned AI. Basically logic and symbolic AI built on rules, code, schema that tell a machine what to do in specific cases. So to give you an analog,
This sounds very early on to my ears.
I mean, a good old fashioned AI actually has never gone away. And in fact, actually, some of the irony is that one of the reasons why LLMs scaled is because, well, after the models stopped getting better, what the language learning labs did, they started building bespoke scaffolding and tooling that made the models perform better on task, even if the models themselves were not getting more capable. Right? You get what I'm saying? So they began implementing they began adding back some of these rules and tool sets from the old days of AI. Not literally, but the premise is, because in the machine learning era, there's this divide of like, okay, do we even need good old fashioned AI anymore? We've got these algorithms that can learn and self improve on their own, right? And well, it turns out the reason why people were going apeshit, starting around late 2024, 2025, was because the labs have begun building workflows. They begun building workflows that would actually apply to specific task, and the model began to get better at those specific tasks because it had the right tooling to do those tasks, right? As opposed to just the model getting quote unquote smarter, right? Now they were telling us, hey, our models are getting too good too quickly, right? And that was kind of true around 2023, 2024. So the leap between like say GPT-2 to GPT-3 was a big deal, because before GPT-2 kind of was just like, it was literally autocomplete. I know people say AI is just spicy autocomplete. That is true. We can go back to the Grandpa Shelby example and kind of say that language understanding gets you certain things for free, and that's why LLMs are a little bit more than just autocomplete. But back in the earlier days, they were literally just autocomplete. And at some point, when they began training it more data and made the models bigger, they began to exhibit other modalities. Now, their ability to do these things was limited, but they were able to do lots of little bits of lots of things, which gave the illusion of there being something here, right? Even for me, and sorry I'm dominating, but even for me, I was an AI skeptic. I'm very close to somebody who was a AGI doomer, and
Many people in our community are, so it's kind of all around us.
we it's true. We SF is so weird though, because you got this hybrid of people who are equally optimistic and equally pessimistic, right? And in my circles, they were doomers, but
Because they are simultaneously, the important element of that is they are enamored of the growth and the capabilities.
oh sure,
They are
right.
seeing the line go up. Their emotional reaction
are
can be either.
They are flip sides of the same coin,
Right.
But I knew doomers, and maybe you may know a booster or whatever, and in 2023-ish, when I was predicting, because early on, and I say in 2021, you've got people trying to create I guess like policy based models, which I don't want to go into technicality, but there's this idea that started appearing in the early 2020s that you could have basically a model trained in one area would have some transfer learning in other areas. And so I made a bet with a friend who was a doomer, and I was like, I don't understand. Transfer learning probably is useful in the margins, right? I could see a model that's good at math, maybe some of that logic translates to basic programming, right? Because some programming code involves numbers. I'm not saying all of it does, but but transfer learning appeared to be much broader than it otherwise would have. And so as the model started scaling, the jump to GPT-2 to 3 to 3 to 3.5 to 4, it actually freaked me out. I was like, oh my God, am I going to become
That's compelling.
Utikowskian doomer? Am I going to be, but then I got in my home lab, I started playing with these models. It's like, okay, that's not what's happening here, right? But
it is somewhat illusory,
right,
as we're witnessing it. Yeah.
And I think for me personally, the reason why this sort of all kind of played out this way is I think language itself encodes a lot of these modalities. And I think I mentioned this discussion, this talk in the last episode. There's a old veteran AI researcher, Michael Woodruff, I believe is his name, gave a talk for the Royal Society. This is not the AI we were promised. He says the same thing. So it's not just me kind of using my Grandpa Shelby metaphor. there are people in the field who are kind of alluding to the same thing. And language packs in a lot of these features that give the kind of like a little bit of affordance towards doing some types of task for a machine, right? Now, that does not mean we get what we were promised. These AI bros have oversold and overpromised us something that is not.
If anything, it means that language itself already has baked in so many of these sort of vergences that it's handing off and it's allowing the capabilities of these LLMs later on to thrive.
Yes. No, I mean, yeah, the modality comes from language use.
Yeah. Props to the people, not to the programs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in this nugget of doomers and boosters, right? There is a question of, okay, where did this permanent underclass narrative come from, right? And you and I were talking about this a little bit before, and obviously it's not that we don't see eye to eye, but I think there's a bit of unpacking of
Two different AI skeptics don't agree. My God.
every AI skeptic has to be on the same page. We have the same beliefs. And it's I can't be AI skeptic and use AI at the same time.
We need to assemble the brigade today.
But yeah, there's a sense of where this narrative came from and who's like kind of pushing the narrative per se, right? And for you, I mean, I know your firsthand or secondhand experiences. Like, what is that sense for you?
Well, and it comes from the first time I was exposed even to the phrase in this era, the permanent underclass, was a very top-down agenda, not conspiracy, where the sort of figures on top, the founders, the designers, the Elon Musks, et cetera, were the ones enamored of this, the coming permanent underclass is right ahead. I, with all my wealth, need to be prepared for it, need to be on top as this radical shift occurs. So that's a very top-down thing, and no phenomena is ever just top-down, right?
Yeah. I mean, for my lens, unpacking the AI bubble, there's really a lot of narrative threads here, because they're different parties, right? So I just told a long roundabout story about the people who were saying scale is all you need, and then hitting a wall, and then turning back to good old fashioned AI, to rules and scaffolding and tooling to have machines that did stuff. And so you have true believers, right, who are part of this camp, who I think that the doomers and the boosters. By boosters, I don't just mean people who are AI bros. I mean people who are actually
True believers.
true believers in the sense that they're techno optimists, right? So they're people who are like, so there's a coin. One side of the coin is there's a guy named Eliezer Yudkowsky. You may have heard of him, but for those of you who don't know, he's like a neckbeard who, for some reason, the media has turned to talk about AI doom, right? So he's one of the key voices leading us into discussing the possibility of AI killing everyone on Earth and everyone, well, literally everything in the light cone of this planet. So if you can see it in space, the AI will colonize it. Literally, it's like a 4X game. It will colonize every planet, every species, every asteroid it encounters to maximize whatever the fuck its objective function is, right?
And he's in the Bay Area, and also he's promoting himself as this kind of expert.
Right.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that coin is a techno optimist who's not just a booster today, who's like, oh yeah, my APM is up. But not only is my APM up, but like in 10 years, imagine how far in the light cone the AI species will travel, right? Some of these people, I say optimists kind of lightly because some of them generally are utopian. Some of them are optimists in the sense that they think that they agree with Yudkowsky, like, okay, AI will kill everybody, but like that's actually good because the species that supplants us, is this superseding species of AI, will be better than us in every way. That we should want to become mulch for these creatures because that's how you maximize utility in the universe, right? So
yeah, this is kind of a bad, script doctoring of like Skynet and the Terminator scenario, but that is essentially what they're talking about. expanded into the long run.
Well, it's like Terminator if, I guess, like,
If they also
Sarah
had,
Connor wanted to help the machines
yeah,
replace
conquer
humans.
the Earth and then leave the Earth and then continue
Right.
being
I
Terminators.
mean,
Yeah.
this is more closer to maybe some Japanese anime where it's like, these stories where the villain wants to kind of replace the world with another world, right? Final Fantasy was 6 like that? Which one had that plot?
5 did.
Okay, I'm sorry, yeah,
Yes,
5.
Final Fantasy 5.
Right. It's just like very common plot in Japanese media where it's like the villain literally wants to replace the world with another world, right?
Yeah.
A better world, a purer world that is pure by some metric of their own imagining.
And inevitably, notably, one in their direct control. And that is the obsession of, again, from my point of view, these oligarchic figures. Their inspiration, like a Sam Altman, is trying to sell this idea. Again, we cannot peer into his mind, but trying to sell the idea of this permanent shift in the capabilities and economic outcomes of the entire world is imminent due to the emergence of AI, and you got to get on the right side now. So the ownership class, shifting all of their resources into these companies and these projects and data centers, et cetera, are trying to position themselves on top to not survive it, but thrive in this new era. And that is the sort of top-down view of the permanent underclass. Can we speak to the experiences of the kind of men and women in the middle? The worker, the worker bee, the engineer, who is that, well, I too want to survive. I don't want to be pushed all the way back down to the bottom of the food chain in this new labor economy.
So there's something to what you're saying. I think what the commonality of all these people is that there is a shift, right? But their views are different, right? So I'm like laying the table.
It's difficult to paint them with one brush.
Yeah.
But they want to be on top when the change occurs motif is itself relatively consistent.
Not completely. So for some of these people, I'm laying out the rogues gallery of characters here just to show you the variance actually in all these views. Like the people who are talking about being mulch, they literally think they are going to die, and they are happy with that because they want a progenitor that is better than them in every way. Right?
They want to have given birth to the next thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is obviously is edgy teenager shit, but
it's edgelord logic. But again, they have enough power to get it into the minds of as many people as possible right now, and to scare and intimidate and influence
right
the career aspirations of people who we know and are working.
I mean, this is definitely a subset. Although supposedly, I believe Musk and somebody argued about this. So Musk purportedly is not on the sublimate everyone side. I mean, not to his credit, but because he wants to, closer to your point, he wants to rule over the future, right? Not be mulch, but
yes, our god emperor of Mars for sure. Yeah.
Right, but you have, even within the people who are kind of like let's say naive, or I guess for lack of a more nuanced word, kind of like emphatic about AI capabilities, right? In either direction, the direction where it kills us or the direction where it helps us. Even within that group, you have this kind of kerfuffle of people who are like, okay, I want to be on the team that is not part of the permanent underclass, or I want to be on the team that is going to usher in the future of intelligence in the universe, which is the side that they want extinction, but they just want to bring about the extinction themselves, right?
For anybody at home who's like, when did this come to predominate sort of the debate? The answer is very quickly in the last couple of years, and you are sharing the sentiment of my personal hero Han Solo. I'm out of it for a little while, and everybody gets delusions of grandeur. Like that's where we're at. This is a delusions of grandeur.
The insane thing is, okay, I mean, and I know I live here, right? So of course I'm familiar with this stuff. I never thought this knowledge would be useful to understand the cultural milieu, let alone the economic machinations of the broader
take over the whole zeitgeist,
right? But like, these were the voices in Silicon Valley. They didn't come from nowhere. Eliezer's been here.
They've been here the whole time.
They've been here the whole time.
Yes, the call was coming from inside the building.
You guys now are learning what I had to learn. I would say 7, 8, 9 years ago.
Welcome to the jungle.
Right. I mean, when I was learning this, I didn't think it was relevant. I was like, okay, I know about some eccentric people, cool. I mean, hopefully this knowledge is never useful. And now it's like, oh my God. Like,
Well,
I think
back then, Sam Altman wasn't even a billionaire. So,
right.
yeah.
So speaking of Sam Altman, so I don't think he belongs to this permanent underclass idea. I mean, maybe,
What bucket should we put him in?
yeah. So let me try and lay out the buckets. I know I'm sorry, dear listener, I've been kind of roundabout. It's just that within these buckets, you've got these weird subgroups, but let's just set up the broad table here. Bucket one are people who believe in capabilities in either direction. They are let's just say they are AI hypists, right? They believe in AGI, either as destructive AGI or productive. All the true believers go here.
Okay.
All the true believers go here. They don't agree, right? They're people who want to use this to create a permanent underclass. They're people who think it's going to kill everybody. They're people who want to bring about the extinction of everybody because that's actually good for some reason, right? So, but this bucket is a true believer bucket. They believe in AGI. I don't know what they do or what they're doing now that is becoming more and more apparent that we're not getting AGI yet. Um, Bucket two, I would say, are managers, right? So this is probably more to the listener's sort of day-to-day experience, right? Managers are people who are in positions to deploy AI or to influence AI deployment. And so managers can be people who are either bought into the delusion. A lot of them are kind of getting they're going through their paces right now because as the AI agents burn through their tokens, they're being asked, hey, why are we spending thousands of dollars per day and nothing's changed about our company fundamentally, right? So
These are like mid-level
mid-level,
white
maybe upper
collar.
mid-level, yeah, white
Yeah.
collar managers, right? So some of the managers are
Maybe they
actual,
used to be technicians, but they've come up into the phase
yeah,
of how I'm getting to choose how to deploy this within a
yeah.
company.
So some of the managers are people who fell the wolves on their eyes. They fell for it, and they actually, in some sense, they kind of are similar to the guys in the first bucket. And they are true believers in maybe not the AGI vision, but the fact that LLMs today are delivering way more value than they are, and so they are emphatically pushing it on everybody because they believe it to be true. Now, I don't have a sense of if the current deflating of the bubble is kind of giving these people room for pause. But as late as this month, there are people demoing like tens of thousands of dollars worth of AI demos, kind of just plowing through tokens and not caring. So maybe they still walk among us. And then the other half of this bucket is just there are managers who don't believe in the capabilities of current LLMs, but like they want to seem like someone who is because it's a current thing in fashion. And for their own job security, if they're the ones who are kind of setting the pace of AI deployment in their companies, they can keep their jobs safe and secure, right? So if you're the one kind of telling everyone, this is where AI should go, not towards my job, but towards those jobs over there. AI goes over there. And you seem like you know what you're talking about. Everyone's going to defer to you as sort of like the voice of AI at your company, right? So
So
there's
it's
a
a
bit of like a
combination of staying on trend, but also deploying these systems almost offensively.
right. It's almost a bit of a witch hunt. You're the witch. You're redirecting the
And you're
hunters.
masquerading as the witch hunter general.
Right. You're like,
Okay,
you go
yeah,
over there. I'm not one of them. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
We love AI here. And you guys should put over there, right?
yeah,
And I know what I'm talking about. You guys better make sure AI is all in those places. Right.
yeah.
Um, so bucket three is, I would say, tech leaders, right? And so there's some sense in which, you know, um, they're people who actually are closer to technology and they probably knew all along that this was not sustainable or viable or valuable. This is,
That the use cases were not as numerous or as essential as were being advertised.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure amongst some of these leaders, some of the people probably fall in the bucket one. So I don't want to kind of pretend that every tech leader is cynically deploying AI knowing it didn't work. Regardless, they were responsible for
But they're
these.
culpable enough because they do have a background in the technical side, and they're not just misguided business heads.
Oh, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. No,
Yeah.
there's no doubt about that. Yeah, and but there is some sense in which the incentives for these guys is just, hey, look, like the world went apeshit when Sam Altman released ChatGPT was 3.5, and everyone's stocks went up. And so if you are going to be a good leader for your shareholders, you're going to make that stock grow by leaning into the thing everyone's screaming about, right? So of course you're going to say AI, AI, AI over and over and over and over again even if you know that it's not as big a deal as they're saying it is, right? So let me
If
give
you
you an
can't
anecdote.
be an innovator, at least be I don't know, at least be an excavator, be a booster of it, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not trying to make these guys uh, more sympathetic than they. I'm not trying to make them sympathetic at all. Is what I'm trying to say. But just to understand their incentives, it's like their companies, had kind of structured set growth. AI provided a breakout opportunity. They are, fiduciarily kind of obligated to grow the company stock. It's just
Yeah,
how,
they have to chase that dragon as they see their
and
duties.
and
Yeah,
all their peers were doing it, right? And so, you know, why not do it? To give you an example of this sort of approach is there's one story where Jensen Huang was asked about Jensen was asked about the future of quantum computing, okay? And he said something that was like kind of dismissive of it because like someone was hyping up. They're like AI is going to lead to quantum computing like very shortly, something like that. I don't remember the exact story, but it's something like that. And Jensen, added some reality to the situation, which is like like those things aren't related, and quantum's not like a thing yet, and like
this is not even applicable. Just if you're
yeah.
being at all honest, you can't make that statement. Yeah,
And then he caused like some stocks to tumble, right? And so if this is the reality and your incentives are to provide a return for um, asset holders, some of which include our retirement funds. Again, I'm not saying we're culpable personally. I'm just saying this is a system we are all shackled to. Then these guys are just sort of playing their part, like, and obviously there's we could be saying, hey, why don't you actually speak out, right? If you see something, say something, right? But if your peers aren't doing it and you're the idiot kind of ignoring free money, your shareholders are going to rake you over some coals, and
their ethos is if you see something, sell something.
yeah, I mean that's the case definitely partially because, well, one, even if they were responsive to this nuance, their peers probably weren't. There's a prisoner's dilemma here, and that's sort of inescapable and unavoidable unless you know have a society where people can solve collective action problems and or there's an incentive to, right?
Hmm. So they must defect in order to betray their peers, simply in their mind, simply to stay relevant.
Right.
Yeah. Um,
I think there might be there's at least two more buckets, but I think the one that matters and the one I think that you're kind of pointing to is like
yeah.
the guys at the absolute apex, the guys at the top, the Sam Altmans of the world, the Elon Musk of the
This
world,
is the ownership class.
right?
This is what we're talking about.
What do they believe, right? And I think once you get this high up, you're kind of dealing with personalities as opposed to dealing with a particular class of interest. Um, and so all these guys, like, they have idiosyncrasies that make them that make you kind of want to tackle them differently. I don't know how much this matters.
And individually, because they're so
A little bit, yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I don't know how much this matters. So this reminds me of a conversation that Karen Howe, who wrote Empires of AI, where she was embedded at OpenAI, kind of early on into their existence, right as they were kind of moonshotting. So Karen Howe had a conversation with Ed Zitron, again, famous bubble popper, um, and Karen was kind of pointing out because Ed was kind of pressuring her on, like, how do these people believe this nonsense? Are there people who actually believe, kind of going over the buckets I've talked about? She kind of touched on them, not in this structure, but as far as I know, I'm one of the few people who put this together in this way. But
She was
she
gesturing
was
at it.
gesturing
Yeah,
at there
totally
being
correct.
people who are true believers who,
Yeah.
and so,
Shout out to Karen Howe. Come on the podcast.
um, you know, and it's like there cannot be people who believe this. He was kind of saying, he's like, there's a class of person who is saying these things so they can get money and they can get, power and whatever. And I think that is true. I think even within the buckets we've said, there are people who are very clearly oriented that way. But like, there are also people who are in these buckets who genuinely believe because either they were the effective design of LLM made them fall in love with it, or they were based off their machine learning knowledge, kind of just enthralled by the idea of encoding intelligence in machines like this, right? So to give you an example from the upper echelon class, Dario Amodei, I believe that's how you say his name, the CEO of Anthropic, okay, was OpenAI researcher, and he and a cohort of people left OpenAI because they weren't doing safety good enough. Okay,
He left in protest.
yeah,
Yeah.
effectively, right.
This is that led to the ouster of Sam Altman in its original.
No.
This was not that
Anthropic
time.
is before that.
Oh, then Anthropic is
The
okay.
ouster though does involve people, and we could talk about that. We did a little bit in the last episode.
The safety-minded people.
The safety-minded people. Yeah. But
Okay.
but the ouster is just literally kicking Sam out of the company.
Right.
But separately from that, there were researchers who left OpenAI beforehand because they're like, OpenAI is not safety-minded. And so Dario studied, I want to say he studied neuroscience and then computer science, or sorry, cognitive science. I believe that's what he studied. Deeply interested in this question of intelligence, deeply worried about AI alignment. And so for years, like he spent like his professional academic career kind of on these questions. And so, when he goes over to Anthropic, like, yes, it's a money-making machine, or that's what they're trying to build. I don't think that disposition disappears. Now, his incentives obviously change, right? But I do think Anamade is separate from Sam, not because he's safer and he's more secure.
More moral.
In fact, in some ways, Anamade might be more dangerous because he actually believes something and might be emphatic about that, right? Whereas an Altman reads more like a kind of a blank slate, if you will, right? Someone who will say anything.
A Sam Altman is just a George Costanza principle of it's not a lie if you believe it's true.
Right.
I think that's, again, without getting to the depths of his mind, I've safely and firmly said that for a while.
Right. So you have in this last bucket, a group of people who they belong together because of their class and because of their similarities, but like each of them has different reasons for acting the way they do. Sometimes they act in concert, but in a lot of ways, it's not necessarily that they're acting together. It's just that I think their incentive structures individually lead them to act this way, even if they are dispositionally different. Elon Musk, another example of this group. I mean, Elon is probably the more, well, for me personally, harder to read. Elon was talking about the Yudkowskian AI doom view since the 2010s. He literally famously said AI is like summoning the demon back in the early, I think 2014 is when he said this.
He's kind of a pupil of that school for a while.
He read Nick Bostrom. I think Bostrom has connections to Yudkowsky.
Yeah.
Right. All this idea of super intelligence, right?
To the original Berkeley clique that is still there, essentially.
Yeah, Bostrom is Oxford, but I think via the broader, I guess you could say, effective altruist / rationalist project, they have interceded.
Right. These are the EA folks. I'm sure our audience has heard some little snippet of this at some point for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I use EA loosely because technically you could say Eliezer and Bostrom aren't EAs, but there is this broader, I would call it a diaspora of people who are rationalist, I guess is what you would call the broader culture, Bay Area rationalist. And of that diaspora, you get all these groups like EA, long-termist, which is kind of like EA.
Produces a Sam Bankman-Fried.
Right. EA is Sam Bankman-Fried. Long-termist is more like, I think Jeff Bezos considers himself a long-termist.
And we'll come back to Jeff Bezos in a second. But yeah, that's who we're kind of putting on this big dartboard.
Right. So Elon has kind of waffled between Dario's position and Sam's position, but also Elon, in some ways, he's more legible than them because he's obviously a craven capitalist, right? To some extent, Elon will just like Sam will say and do whatever benefits him in the moment, right? I mean, what came out of the trial between him and Sam, it was Musk's money that actually seeded OpenAI as a nonprofit because, again, specifically Eliezer and Bostrom had convinced Elon to put money towards saving us, quote unquote, saving us from AGI.
From this demon that they were summoning.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, back then, OpenAI wasn't making a product. They were doing research.
For profit.
Right. So, but in this pursuit of
Can I just say it's still funny that in the open trial between Sam Altman, the known liar, and Elon Musk, the awfulest guy in any room, that it's Elon Musk who loses. I think that's fascinating. On the
he
merits, clearly, but it's just
most of his most of his most of his stuff is self-owning. That's his specialty.
yeah.
Yeah. When he wins, it's just because I guess there's just the barrier to stopping him was too high. But like he's sort of and we could talk about this later. You know
Yeah.
my thoughts about
We'll
it.
come back around to it.
Yeah.
No, the point is in the trial, a lot of this is revealed to sort of the original sin of where these deals were made to fund it, to push it, and that's where Sam Altman got his funding.
Yeah, and so early on, actually, I think I forget what year it came out in the trial. Elon is egging OpenAI when they had like, I guess, a small breakthrough to become a for profit. So it's like this is the guy that was publicly biting his nails about AGI, and then when it becomes possible to monetize it, he tries to monetize it. He wanted to roll OpenAI into Tesla. And ironically, if that had happened, we may not have the AI bubble as it exists today. Elon Musk could have possibly saved us from
This entire nightmare.
this entire nightmare.
Well, because if he's like, oh, we're summoning a demon, and then he pays to fuel the summoning of that demon, that's hypocritical at best.
It's hypocritical at best. One read is that
Cynical at
one read
most, yeah.
of that is when he created Grok, he was saying something like, "Oh well," because he's an idiot, obviously. But to the extent he understands these subcultures, and these subcultures are also full of idiots too. But to the extent he understands these
like very wealthy, educated idiots. So
Right.
right.
To the extent he understands what these guys are saying, he's like, "Oh, you know what? If we make an AI that just wants to seek the truth, they won't kill us." Right. So if he
surely not.
if he actually believes that, right, this is the loophole in his mind.
Yeah.
That will, and I'm this is us mind reading. Obviously, I'm not saying I know.
Right. No, we're having to read the tea leaves here.
In
yeah.
Musk heart of hearts, right? If Musk actually believes this loophole, right, this idea that making a maximally truth-seeking AI will save everybody, it allows him to be consistent. He was afraid of the demon back when we didn't understand that maximally truth-seeking AIs could be made, and that's how you avoid.
What was even possible?
Right.
Yeah.
And then concurrently, as his business interests change, well, you can solve this problem with the maximally truth-seeking AI, of course, right?
And his beliefs and his fears also change to align with the profit motive. Yeah. Typically and inexorably.
Yeah.
So I said a second ago, and I'm so grateful that you set up like these different buckets to put these sort of deplorable figures in, either culpable or truly terrible. I want to ground this in a specific example, just so we can examine it, a little more gristle off the bone here. Very recently, it was revealed and announced and hyped that Amazon, behind the scenes, Jeff Bezos personally was leading an effort to implement large swaths of AI decision-making and services within Amazon itself. It went horribly by all metrics.
Is it Bezos or is it Jassy? Bezos is out of Amazon. I think it was Jassy, right?
I mean, Bezos was pushing it, like saying, oh, this is interesting. In terms of who was on the ground behind, I don't know whose head should roll for this, but it resulted in, crashing of something that should never crash, which is the Amazon storefront.
Oh yeah.
A terrible amount of screw ups on orders. Like, if we are sort of, inheriting the example of why is Facebook great? Because Facebook never goes down. Then that's the only rule. That's the only metric for the success of Facebook, and that's fine. That works. Amazon is at least your basket never gets emptied randomly.
Right.
It remembers the stuff you want to buy. Even if you're like, I shouldn't be buying all this stuff, but at least Amazon remembers. Even that fundamental lowest threshold for success was botched because they got so excited, they got so in their own heads about it, that this AI capabilities were true and that they were going to follow it up and it was going to make everybody all this money. And therefore they could fire or reposition all of their employees. It was going to make everything better. And now we've seen it at scale for the first time in a huge tech company like Amazon.
Yeah. This is a story playing out.
in real time right
It,
now as of the publishing of this episode.
oh no, not just that story, but so that Amazon reporting is back from March. I talked about it in my what to expect when you're expecting the AI bubble. Um,
Shout out to misaligned.markets. Check it out now.
so that idea. I mean, like those stories were happening, and those companies like Amazon were at the vanguard of that. I guess comedy of errors. I guess you could say. And what surprised me is after that reporting, I have friends and I know of companies in the area that as late as April and May were kind of accelerating their AI adoption after reading stories like Amazon having those major issues. So at this stage where we're at is
These are now second order effects.
yeah
The willingness of the Amazon heads to adopt this, regardless of the result, which was a terrible result objectively, is now encouraging other firms, smaller competitors, bigger ones, to say, "Oh, well, it's legitimate now because they're doing it. We get to do it, or we ought to, we have to avoid becoming pushed down into the permanent underclass." Right?
yeah.
This is now the how we have to contend with this.
And now the irony is I mean everyone's starting to hit the wall at the same time, right? So you got the token spend is out of control. Uber went through their entire year's budget. I think I mentioned this in the last
Their
episode.
entire token budget.
They're for the year in 4 months.
Terrifying.
And there is a company. This came out even more recently since the last episode. This is newer. There's an unnamed company, unnamed source said because they did not meter their company's token spend, they spent I think like 500 million on AI costs this quarter. They didn't mean to.
They accidentally spent $5 million.
500 million.
$500 million.
I think so. I had to check the yeah.
Yeah, check the episode notes for that one. That's a good grief. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So this is sort of like
when is there a stockholder revolt sort of against, right? Because second order effects is one thing. That's kind of the people, the business heads in the one bucket, all kind of hyping each other up. But there are other ownership groups that have to say at some point, you are literally burning through all of our cash. This is our money. They do have rights. Like, I haven't really witnessed that yet. Maybe because the bells and the red alarms or the flags aren't being raised high enough.
yeah. So this is interesting, right?
Except
So
on this podcast.
not just I mean, so I laid out the buckets of people who are kind of the core actors, of like the bubble from the tech side. For the rest of society, we've obviously got investors and we've got the media. The media has just been saying this is the fourth industrial revolution.
Mhm.
Don't get left behind, right? And in some sense, the media is actually where the permanent underclass idea, I don't want to say it originates, but where it gets steam, right? I think within tech itself, you have obviously people who are upper middle class, right? Who there's a good video on this by How Money Works, where he's talking about basically, and I agree with this. Silicon Valley was sort of the last egalitarian bastion. I put this in quotes because
The last
obviously,
great meritocracy.
right?
Sort of, yeah.
Where it's like if you come here and you work hard and you got equity in the right company, you could actually have a good life, right? You put in the work, you get the equity, you exit, right? And you did something for the world at the same time, right? How the world should work, right? That's why there is such this mythos and this sort of air of even moral kind of like a finality of Silicon Valley. It's like this. If the 90s was the end of history, Silicon Valley is sort of what that looks like, right? And in theory, right? In quotes, right?
Does that make Palo Alto the city on a hill? Like, is that essentially what was being sold as an idea?
I mean, no one said this out loud. I'm saying this is sort of like, this is sort of the way people, quietly said this is how it should work, right? People come in, they put in their hours, they get equity, they get to exit, they did something for the world. This is why the system, and you can fill in the blank for what the system is. It could be capitalism as a whole, could just be the technocracy, could be just, tech companies as a whole, right? Whatever. All these sort of like modern technocratic apparatuses, this is why they work, right? Look at the results. People who came in here who were poor, went to college and studied computer science. That's why everyone should code became such a moniker, because this was proving the vision of what, the end of history should look like, what it was expected to look like, right? And so the people buying into the permanent underclass narrative now see that, well, that was kind of a lie. Now that all the VC money is locked up in AI, and AI increases your APM, well, time to, join the side that is pushing AI for whatever reason, right? Whether they're doomers, boosters, nihilists that want us all to die, Elon Musk, right? Dario Amodei, who wants to save us while working on AI, right? Regardless of why they are boosting AI, join them so that you're not in the permanent underclass when the AI inevitably increases your APM and everyone else's APM is too low to keep up with you, right? So media is an important part of obviously feeding that fear. Every time they were reporting job loss numbers like a freaking horse race, right? They are feeding the idea that it's coming, everyone's losing their job to AI. Now they've started to walk it back as the bubble has become harder and harder to deny. But the damage of the idea was done. I mean, there are people still, even now, worried about losing jobs to AI, even though I think it's become apparent that, if you lose your job to AI, it may not be because of AI. It might be because someone wanted to cut costs and they're just pointing to a accountability sink to justify their decision, right? And you asked a good question about where are the investors? They're burning money. Are they sleeping at the wheel?
It's their
Well,
money. Yeah. I mean,
it's
yeah.
their money is enabling. OpenAI has, I believe, either information or Zitron reported negative 133% operating margins.
Mhm.
If you or I to run a company that poorly, right, we are losing 33 cents for every dollar.
It's only profitable if you take out all the unprofitable elements.
Right. So the investors obviously, well, one, they don't understand what work is.
Yes, and they're also, let's point out another sort of not a new bucket, but another element of this network, this web, and those are media figures and critics who are enamored of and have been, you know, tech journalists for a long time, starting as far back as the era of Steve Jobs, were sort of hero worshippers, and that was a critique that was very much eventually validated within tech journalism. So, okay, we have to stop worshiping these heroes. Back then, when Elon Musk was Iron Man and when Steve Jobs was still alive and he was still this aspirational figure. Now, because they're not permitted to become these fanboys and girls, they have to still sell something, and they're selling and therefore perpetuating the myth around AI, and therefore a lot of these associated myths like the permanent underclass. They're selling this whole package, and investors seemingly are buying it. Eventually, it comes down to basic taxpayers are buying it. And as much as there is now a better understanding of the basic elements of all these systems and how they're not what we were told they were, even as that understanding grows month by month, quarter on quarter, year by year, it hasn't reached a saturation point yet, seemingly. It hasn't reached the revolt stage. And I'm saying that because I've been looking around and we've been commenting to each other, well, when is that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things at play here. I mean, the real thing is, so investors don't know how work works, right? So they were just like, the people who are kind of being one-shotted by Claude, who are saying my APM's up without understanding if the APM being up is a good thing or a bad thing. Investors, I
They
think,
can't read the screen because their monocles are too fogged up. Like that's.
I mean, these people aren't. I mean, these are.
I'm making fun, but
No,
yeah, that's
I
basically
know
what we're
you.
talking
No,
about.
I know you are. I mean, so these people are like usually. So just like the workers who are obsessed with APM and they've been impressed or enthralled by the AI.
Right. Well, and the worker groups are also doing it because they're terrified of being downsized.
Some of them are,
Rightfully so.
Some of them are. Some of them are.
Some of them are more craven. You're saying?
The ones I'm specifically thinking about, the ones who are talking about APM, or I'm using APM as my metaphor, but
Sure,
the ones who are
yeah.
obsessing over this, I can do more, and it's just one more token, bro.
Yeah.
They're, for the most part, they are well-off tech workers. They are like the upper middle class. They are the people for whom, the promise of meritocracy in Silicon Valley existed, and it has gone away or has started to go away, right? So
But they're still subscribed to it.
they're subscribed to it via the last remaining bastion in their mind, which is get your APM up high enough so that you can escape, you can reach escape velocity, right? Um, but the features of large language models that made these workers susceptible to this idea, the people who should know better, right, are the same features that made investors, fall for the delusion too, and doubly so for investors because they don't do. I mean, they're not trying to be funny, but they don't do any work. They don't do the actual grunt work of the companies they invest in.
Yeah,
Right?
as of
Maybe
today, we haven't reclassified investing as working, and thank God. So
right. Maybe they did at some point in the 90s or whatever, whenever they made their money and exited, right?
mhm, mhm.
But I'm saying like they are far enough removed from these processes where they are kind of looking over the shoulders of everyone else and saying, "Oh, that looks good. That looks good. That looks fine. That looks fine." Right? Because they don't have any other means of doing that. And now that this has gone on so long, right? Now that no one called foul earlier, even if they know that this is not working out, their incentive, sort of just like all the other people who are trapped, right? We're talking about the tech CEOs, the leaders who are kind of like trapped in that they probably know the technology is not.
They're locked in because not only did they make these promises, but they have burned through all this money pursuing these promises, and either it works to some degree that it launches them far enough that like their growth overwhelms the losses, which is also not rational by any metric and based on the current losses. Um, and they somehow come out the other side, as you've been describing.
Or
Right.
they know this is not gonna work and they're looking for the exit liquidity, right? So there's a story of Elon Musk and
Just unload the debt on somebody else.
right, like the
Like
SpaceX
the space
SpaceX
or the
IPO.
taxpayer or
Yeah,
anybody. Yeah. Yeah.
right. The SpaceX IPO, literally, when Nasdaq was ushering to change the rules, Nasdaq was fast tracking SpaceX, and a lot of regular indexes would get, if they have access to the Nasdaq, would get
Would have
exposure.
this exposure. The S&P didn't follow suit.
But still, you see kind of like the plan here is like, I think now I don't know who's who. I don't know who knows what is happening, but obviously amongst the people who are still boosters, I think some of them are cynically so, right? You've been doing this song and dance for so long, you can't stop now. You have to keep going. There's no other way out but through,
Yeah.
right? Which makes some of these people more dangerous, right? So I believe we still have a bunch of true believers. I think at some point, they'll wake up. But amongst the people who are pretending to be true believers, I think they are just cynically, their incentives make it such that they have to actually keep this song and dance up because
Right.
they you gotta find a way out.
They are entirely locked into it. Yeah.
Right.
They have to because there's no other way. Um, yeah, and I was not relieved is the wrong word. Validated recently when I heard Elon himself speaking on, well, in defense of this behind the scenes merger of his AI company and SpaceX. It's like, yeah, it's natural because and people were questioning like, well, you can slam these two companies together. One is bleeding money, the other is very profitable, and I guess the books work out. But what are the efficiencies? How do they organically fit together?
We're gonna take all the matter in our light cone. What
matter in our light cone, right.
what don't you understand?
Yeah, well, why are you so dumb, you media critics? And they're like, okay, but what's like the step one?
All matter in the light cone.
That's the step. Why don't you listen to me? And no, he said basically, and we're making fun of like the idea of, oh, they're gonna get everything, the Borg, every resistance is futile. And he's like, yeah, well, we're gonna have data centers more efficiently. We'll launch them into space, and then they'll just cool themselves easier up there, and that's what we're gonna do. That's what SpaceX is gonna do. I was like, my God, he's finally off his rocker. He's saying these words in public.
Right.
Data centers in space sounds like a rejected comedy bit from the Muppet Show. It's to my ears. And again, I don't know what our audience thinks. We'll find out if they continue to do it. I don't think we're going to see data centers in space. Mostly because I don't think we're going to see data centers in Tennessee. Like that is also a bubble on its own that is being pushed. So
yeah, no, very good call. Yeah, I mean, I look at the reporting of someone like Zitron who's showing a lot of these data centers are not being built or they are behind schedule.
Even as the money's sort of on paper been dedicated to it, it's just piling up debt.
The data center, yeah, exactly. The data center, the AI bubble. When I said this in the last episode, AI bubble is closer to actually a data center bubble, right? So
Right.
you've got like a tiny bubble in the form of the AI startups like Anthropic, OpenAI, and that would be bad, by itself. But it wouldn't be that bad because the losses would be kind of centered on Silicon Valley. But
They couldn't therefore be just unloaded onto all the rest of the world and the country and other people and classes and such. Yeah.
yeah, but the data centers, we've got some of the world's biggest banks have invested in lending money to these, and the
And now it starts to look like '08 again if we're getting the banks involved.
literally the debt structures to finance these data centers, they resemble some of the collateralization we saw in '08.
Terrible.
So it literally is like somebody had the bright idea to replicate '08 with data centers, and on top of the banks doing it, we have these entities called private credit, or non-depository financial institutions, shadow banks, some people call them, and private credit has lent money for the data centers too, and in some cases they've taken money from the bank to lend out to other people to build data centers, right? So there's a very circle jerky motion, not unlike the one in Silicon Valley where the AI companies are feeding each other money, like OpenAI to NVIDIA to CoreWeave, et cetera, but separately from that AI company bubble, there is a data center bubble that involves these entities, some of which we don't even know who they are, lending money to build data centers that may not ever be built, right?
Yeah, and then this self-licking ice cream cone kind of process. I'm thinking now back to the second Trump inauguration, and without diverging us right into purely political territory, on stage with the incoming president were all of the great tech oligarchs. And even at that time, there was the plan being pushed for Congress itself, on behalf of the American people, to contribute to and pay for this Stargate initiative.
Right.
And I didn't, I remember the Stargate thing very eventually going off the headlines, and like it didn't get picked up by Congress because they hate the idea. It's clearly a boondoggle. But the second that Elon said data centers in space, I'm like, he's still trying to get some form of Stargate out there.
Yeah.
Of this concept, like we need to get the American taxpayer on the hook, otherwise it's only going to hurt us, the tech oligarchs.
That's how their companies work, though. I mean, that's why the Silicon Valley loves working with the government, right?
Yeah.
So, like, it's a natural extension of their existing business relationships, right? And for Elon specifically, it's a little hard to know if he is just that big of a. Well, he is dumb, but it's hard to know how serious he is. I used to think that it
Any
was
given time,
right.
We don't know. Yeah. So
I used to think that some of the stuff was tactical, not to his credit, but it's become apparent that I think this is what happens when you have too many yes men around you, is that your worst impulses are not curtailed, and we're seeing this with Trump, obviously, in every dimension of Trump's life. And so Elon grew up as a sci-fi nerd, and like, of course, he likes data centers in space. He's now a billionaire toddler who gets to live out his fantasies. And I'm sure data centers in space, it sounds futuristic. It sounds right.
For a person suffering arrested development, as we have all sort of armchair diagnosed him as, this is too perfect for him,
right?
For his mindset,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it obviously doesn't matter if he believes it or not, right? Like, did he believe we're going to go to Mars, and now he's saying we're going to go to the moon, which is, he should have been promising that before Mars.
Different kind of pitch.
But yeah, I mean,
it really only matters if he does get the taxpayer on the hook, which seems to be they're constantly probing and poking at.
Not just the taxpayer, but other. I mean, like,
yeah.
Even though Tesla's a meme stock, right? I mean, they've not really created a new car, and I mean, I guess if you call a Cybertruck a car, fine. But they
haven't created a new successful vehicle in over a period of years. Yeah.
So, if these companies are meme stocks, and Elon knows he could say whatever to rile up the markets, then why not speak a little bit to your childhood fancy, right? Why not kind of placate your inner toddler and just say shit that the media, the uncritical media will just kind of parrot and amplify, and not question you on, right?
Yeah, in that sense, it's if not a great tactic, it's a great strategy. So, in that we are not we don't have a defense against it, purely speaking.
Right.
Um, yeah. So having said that, this all sounds like very dire sort of assessment. Let me inject an idea here that is not, if not hopeful, I think it is revealing.
Okay.
And that is at a certain point, I saw in the permanent underclass discourse a fear emerge in the eyes and in the sense of these oligarchs. And this was not Elon specifically, but there was a consistent reference to, when this new era dawns ahead of us, we all need to have enough wealth put away that we're not the people relying on UBI.
Yep.
That was the dividing line. There's
Yes.
going to be, you know, the underclass is fed and watered by UBI. Everybody else has made it. Their rocket ship took off, metaphorically speaking, and they have enough wealth they can sit on their Scrooge McDuck mountain. That's the distinction. And as soon as I saw that, it's like, okay, they're now seeing that there's enough of a consensus coming around UBI, for one thing, that it's a fear for them. It's a calculation for them. And this is a tacit admission, I guess, is kind of what I'm pointing at. And it to me, it's just not a reveal. It's a bit of a self-own in a larger sense, because for all of its, the debate around the implementation of UBI, creating cultural and policy consensus was one of the goals of everybody before the era of the tech oligarchy. It was, how do we rebalance this equation for the worker? How do we build the economy for what it's meant to be, which is to help, in a utilitarian sense, distribute wealth in the most frictionless way possible. And their fear is actually that wealth will be distributed this way, and they want to stand sort of askance history or thwart history and say no. They want to stymie this progress, and I think that's them revealing themselves.
Your diagnosis is right. I think though the timing is not like particularly interesting. I mean, like, the real thing is that they've been doing this actually for over a decade, right? So you have Andrew Yang, for example, talking about UBI, obviously
Andrew Yang, currently aspiring tech bro.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of was, because he had a company as well, or he kind of always has been, I should say.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not just Yang. I mean, actually, OpenAI, I forget the relationship to this other entity. I want to say there's some research arm in this EA adjacent philanthropy universe. Yeah, I forget who. But like, and I believe Sam Altman was connected to the study. They did a UBI study, right? So this was like a while ago, right? So I'm saying like my
6 or 7 years.
Yeah,
I think I remember what you're saying. This was, if I'm not mistaken, Y Combinator was taking pitches for design your own UBI distribution system, bring it to us, and we'll build around it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So I for some reason I thought it was Open Philanthropy. But maybe Open Philanthropy did their own. I had to double check that.
Well, I think this was kind of in the water.
But that's why I had the Sam Altman connection in my mind.
Yeah.
Y Combinator makes sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but tech has explored some notion of this for the last 10 years, because they were always afraid of quote unquote the revolt, and they were looking for the bread and circuses even as early as the late Obama years, right? And so they have been trying to get ahead of this, but almost always through placation and words, and their preferred UBI strategy of sort of like, in many cases, just having a social safety net floor and kind of just leaving it at that, and just saying, hey, we have a lump sum payment you get every month. That's all you need. There is no,
even as we are currently fighting against the long time misformed policy that is minimum wage. They're like, okay, well, we'll give you that at least, everybody minimum wage, and then we just suppress that as much as we can over time.
Right.
Yeah. which isn't what UBI was originally conceived of and should not be.
There's a whole universe of UBI options, and
Yeah.
a genuine debate would look way more multifaceted. Arguably, though, the Y Combinator study did actually provide some good ammunition for a more expansive UBI program.
Right.
I don't remember the details though, and I can't go into like super great detail. But like I remember being surprised at the time that a tech company or a tech adjacent
Was
entity
even involved
was
in
even
this.
involved in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It to me, it didn't feel like an organic fit. It felt like this was sort of
They hired
inserting themselves.
they
This was the
hired-
Ron TAs moving in again.
they hired researchers, and with some of these entities that are nonprofits in the space, they do care, right? So you have you have arms of these entities that actually care about the issues they're engaging. I mean, to go back to the AI story and what we were talking about in these buckets of people, you got people who actually care about the thing to the state, right? So you brought up early on the Sam Altman's ouster from OpenAI, right?
Mm-hmm.
That happened because at OpenAI there were people who were doomers who genuinely believed that AI could kill everybody,
Very depressed moralist.
and they were like, Sam Altman is antithetical to the mission of preventing that from happening, right? And even amongst people at Anthropic, who are probably amongst that bucket 1 and bucket 2, like they're people who are Anthropic who believe AI actually could be a force for good, and they are trying to find good applications for AI. There are people who believe AI is a force for bad, and they're trying to do AI safety research, right? You have all these kind of amalgamations of different types of people working together in the same entities, sometimes resulting in outcomes that are kind of contra to what you would expect the organization or entity to actually pursue, because they've got an arm within their institution or whatever that is aligned in this way.
And I think I'll make a bet here. I feel safe making that bet. At some point, this UBI program, as it was being designed, would have paid people out in crypto. That's just a guess, but it feels like the kind of solid top-down manipulation that was going to be attempted.
I think it was the premise behind Sam Altman's WorldCoin, which I barely understand.
WorldCoin, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, WorldCoin is separate from the Y Combinator UBI study, so they're not one the same. But like, Sam,
it's of a kind, though.
Yeah, but with Sam, a lot of his stuff just reads like grifts. If you know about his first company, Loot, at Y Combinator, Loot basically,
the audacity of naming a company Loot, by the way, is I'm sure not lost on anybody.
Basically, it lied about his subscriber numbers, and they were inflated, and how he kind of put himself on the map, right? So Sam has always been kind of like a bit of a schemer, a scammer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even more so than like, again, like, not to I don't want to make this seem like I'm an Anthropic fanboy. I'm not, but Dario Amodei.
I can confirm you are not an Anthropic fanboy.
Yeah, Dario Amodei actually is not a schemer. He literally was probably, obsessed with this AI question, just like the Yudikowskis of the world, who, again, like, as crazy as these people sound, to some extent, actually believe something. Now, to what extent that has kind of corrupted their kind of like broader sense of understanding of the world, and to what extent are the incentives that reward them for having those beliefs, right? So Eliezer, for example, somebody who now gets rewarded for repeating this message of doom, even as it's become apparent that, at least for now, LLMs are not going to be the pathway to whatever it is he's
even
investing.
As the public is increasingly aware and skeptical of these pitches and promises, he is still pushing the doom message,
right,
with greater and greater intensity.
Right. So there is this, not to focus on any one particular person, but there is this sort of tension that these people genuinely came to this moment as they were with these beliefs, right? But someone like even Eliezer, who does not produce anything, as far as I know, is making, I believe, $400,000 or more with his nonprofit, right? So it's like, I guess now you could argue there is a question of whether or not,
just his paycheck for working at the nonprofit.
Yes. It might actually be 600,000. I don't actually know. In the show notes, listeners, every correction or whatever I will issue, I will specifically say all the information I'm saying here, so you have the correct version of,
subject to the errata
of my hazy memory of all this chaos of the AI bubble.
This is the sea in which we swim.
Yeah, but yeah, there's a question for me. It's like, okay, like this guy clearly came to this vision. You know, when you read his early writings, whatever, like I think he genuinely believed this, and then now he's getting paid $400,000 to $600,000 to say this, and it's obvious that it's not true anymore, and he's not updating his point of view. Well, maybe the incentives now have captured him such that he, even if he doesn't believe this anymore, he wants to keep saying it because he gets paid to say it, right? Same's true for Dario, and
He's not as locked in, but he's essentially locked in his own path.
They're all locked in some way, right?
Because their reputations are staked on it,
right? Their money, careers,
their little legal culpability, all these things are locked in.
I mean, they all dovetail.
They're locked in these buckets,
right? Yeah, some of these we can't actually know what they are because it requires mind reading. But like some of these, you can probably assume, like if you're making that kind of money, it's probably hard to distance yourself from access to that kind of money, right?
I also would hazard a guess, and again, this is just an assessment.
Yeah.
Based on their skill sets and their training and their what school and where they got their degrees or not, I don't think they have real separate skill sets. Like they've come into a place in a time where tech was sort of on the ascendancy, and they went all in because it made sense, and they had a certain expertise that worked. But they can't exist in any other frame or in any other era, or at least not in the same way as they'd like to. Or they couldn't be the expertise. They couldn't be the gurus that they have become.
I think that's right. I think this is an environment that is perfect fauna for this exact type of, call it a grift, call it a vision gone too far, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, right? And they all came here with their particular idiosyncrasies, whether they were true believers or not. But they all, the result is that they ended up kind of pushing the same false narrative that, as it diffused to the media, right? So, as much as it did, right? To the extent that it did, it kind of just became, look, we're not going to do the work of picking apart these different buckets, these different people, but many of them are directionally saying, either cynically or not, that AI is capable of some great things. Mm-hmm. We're just going to repeat this over and over and over again until you're scared about, losing your job and whatnot.
If you flood the zone enough, and this is, it creates a kind of inevitability in the minds of the working class and the middle class audience for this, and that inevitability is intimidating. It's terrifying. And using targeted rhetoric like the permanent underclass, even those words coming out of my mouth, I'm a little bit scared. Even as we've been sitting here parsing it and tearing it down, like it's a potent set of ideas and phrases, especially when paired with the even more terrifying and potent rise of AI narrative. And, in it, I think this is a healthy place to wrap up, and also to send people immediately after listening to this podcast, please do check out Ed Zitron's works, and also come on the show anytime. I'm gonna keep plugging it until it works. But a lot of the bubble popping and myth bursting, I didn't say myth busting because it's probably copyrighted, has been done by Ed, and is incredibly valuable to me and to Michael as well. Is there a particular one you can point them to? I'm trying to think on my own. Like,
it's
type him into YouTube and just start if you don't know his catalog.
I'll put something in the show notes that is a good starter. I can't off the top of my head think of anything, but stuff's moving so fast that he actually showed up on Bloomberg, which is like mainstream. He's now mainstream. Like we're at the height of the bubble because Ed Zitron is on your dad's Bloomberg terminal.
Yeah, he's on your dad's TV, trying to speak truth, right?
Right. It's like this is I think people are waking up, right?
Yeah.
But I will put those in the show notes, and all the other references I've been making, half remembered or totally remembered.
Yeah.
All go in the show notes.
They're all there for sure. So yes, thank you again for joining us on this episode of The Last Enclosure.
I've been Michael.
And I've been Nick, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you again.
Mike here. Thank you so much for listening to The Last Enclosure.
If you like this episode or you like the series, please like or share or leave a review or comment wherever you are listening or watching this podcast. If you want to get in touch with us, please reach out to us at contact@the Last Enclosure or visit our website listed in the show notes.